to the ABC Podcast.
Always be cool.
The show where your hosts, DC and BK, showcase your local business and real estate pros going gangbusters in leadership, community involvement, and just being cool.
Here are your hosts, serial entrepreneurs, mortgage experts at Summit Lending, and partners in crime, Darren Copeland and Bobby Kerr.
All right, everybody. It's the Always Be Cool podcast, hanging out with your hosts, Bobby Kerr, Darren Copeland.
What's up, everybody?
We are really, really excited today. We are hanging out with someone with whom all Kansas City Royals fans are very, very familiar. I'll let DC give the formal introduction, but we have Mr. Joel Goldberg.
All right, everyone, here we go. Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, keynote speaker, and published author, has worked in 4 markets in his 25-year career, covering 2 World Series championship teams and thousands of baseball games, not to mention multiple Super Bowls, NHL playoffs, and March Madness. He's had the pleasure of interviewing countless athletes, Hall of Famers, and celebrities. Longtime job covering the Kansas City Royals, serving as host of Royals Live, pregame, and postgame shows, author of his book called Small Ball, Big Results. All-around awesome guy. Welcome to the show, Joel Goldberg. How you doing, man? Thank you.
Hey, guys. Bobby, Darren, what's going on?
Hey, man. We are super excited to have you on the show today.
Well, I'm excited to be here with you, and you guys know this, being diehards like you are, that you can talk baseball year-round, but you know, I think this is always a good month to talk about it before the hot stove gets going, but we're all missing baseball,
right?
I think, and don't get me wrong, I'm happy to have the break right now, but sure. It's nice to still be able to talk about it. There's obviously a lot going on, and World Series, so it's a good time of year.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll talk about some baseball and some business stuff. But I was reading something that was really cool, Joel. So apparently, I was reading, like, when you were a younger kid, you would actually tell your teachers about the news the night before. Is that kind of how is that how you started dreaming about this broadcasting gig?
Yeah, for sure. And good research on that. I think for some reason I picture it with just one teacher. My guess is it was probably every teacher, but I seem to feel like either my first or second grade teacher, and this is how I'm able to identify it because she moved up a grade with us. So I know that it was Mrs. Dunwoody in either first or second grade that was telling my parents that I was, disrupting class to give, look, we were at a time period back then in the 80s where you got everything out of the box score and the newspaper. Even an 8-year-old kid was looking for that because I probably wasn't able to stay up till the end of the game. Mm-hmm. And so I woke up and the first thing I did, if I wasn't listening on a radio in my bedroom, was to find out what happened, and then I had to go tell everybody about it. There was something in me early on, even still to this day, that feels like I want to be the one to tell everyone. I don't know why. And even still now, look, there's nothing I can tell anybody at this point that they don't hear from a million other places with the way social media is. But, usually when we travel, I'm one of the only ones there. And I'm certainly the only one there that's on a TV platform. So there's, to me, a lot of excitement and responsibility in being able to be the guy that gets to do that.
Well, I think that's interesting. So the responsibility of being a storyteller, right? Because that's what you are. You're a storyteller. That's what you were doing as a kid in Mrs. Dunwoody's classroom. You're being a storyteller. And I think it's interesting, too, when we're talking about, like, kids who have that desire to, like, either be heard
right.
or be seen, or they're musicians, aspiring musicians or storytellers or broadcasters. Like, as a musician my entire life, I can't tell you how many times I got in trouble for, like drumming on a desk or humming songs in the middle of the classroom, but I couldn't help it. You could not help yourself from telling stories.
Right. And, you hope over time that the music gets better, that the storytelling gets better, and that you're held accountable to that. But yeah, I think that's probably it. I think that's a good connection there, Bobby, because it's you have that in you early on, and then you find a love and a joy for it. And then, you want to perfect it. You never do. You're constantly working on that. But I think that, look, any of us, people say all the time, well, you got the greatest job. You get to talk about sports every day. And I agree with that. I wouldn't, but you have to love it. And believe it or not everybody in even a great industry, or players for that matter, love it. They might just be really talented and they understand that that's the path that they're taking. But I love doing it, and even as you were, and it's not like you said anything that surprised me, but to hear, all the years with the Royals, that's not anything I could have ever envisioned. I don't know when I came here in 2008 that I had a long-term plan. I think if I were to go back then, I would have hoped that this would work out long-term, but you don't really know. And then over time, you start thinking this is the right place, and this is it. And that's where you find that sweet spot, right? So I'm lucky. There are a lot of people that would love to trade places. There are a lot of people that wanted to get into this that never made it. And somehow, some way, after 28 years in the business, I think as we're talking right now, it's just maybe a couple weeks over, maybe like a week over 28 years of since my first job in television. So, it's pretty cool.
And that's amazing, Joel, because a lot of people don't realize, even Bobby on a much smaller scale, prepping for shows and, you actually have to do your homework. But, someone like you who does this professionally, Joel, I don't think, the average bear really realizes how much homework there is and how much studying there is in order to be prepped, for the Royals pregame, postgame, everything that's going on. And maybe you can touch a little bit on that is, what does that look like in terms of, doing homework and doing all the research? So, you look like smooth and silky when you're on TV.
I think it's a great question, Darren. And I think it's different for everyone. I have an idea without all the specifics of the way each of our broadcasters prepare, just in kind of the way I watch them go about their business. I'm not sitting there with them while they're doing all of their homework, but we all sort of go about it in completely different ways. And I think that what helps with the preparation, and I don't know, maybe this is the same, Bobby, with music, but when you do it long enough and you do it over and over again, it's not that you have it all figured out, but what you have figured out is what works for you. Mm-hmm. And so when you figure out what works for you, you end up spending a lot less time than you did in the past, where you're searching for your kind of your methods and your rhythm and your flow. And so in many ways, I feel like I don't have to work as hard now as I did before. It's not because I earned that right. I think, if you're someone like a Denny Matthews, say, you can do whatever the heck you want. And I'm not saying he does. I'm just saying, like, whatever he does to me is good enough, because when you've been, I don't know what the cutoff is, but when you've been somewhere for that long, but he has his routine that works for him too. And it's probably changed since 1969, but it hasn't probably changed a ton in recent years because it's what works for him. And so I know it works for me. And so you end up spending so much less energy on the things you did before because you figured out over time that was a waste of time. Mm-hmm. And so, I really, in many ways, learned that from doing hockey for a number of years, even somewhat recently. And I was doing Kansas City Mavericks, before that, Missouri Mavericks hockey games. And I might do 10 games a year. And I was doing some college hockey games. Not enough to ever get good at it. Needed more rhythm and reps. But what I figured out over a couple of years was, half of this work that I spent 2 days doing in my preparation, I never used. So, okay, let's eliminate that. Okay, now, instead of it taking 2 days, it takes half of a day. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same thing with baseball, where there are a lot of rabbit holes you can go down. But if I'm not going to use them, or they're not going to be of use to my audience, then what's the point? If I want to do it for fun, that's great. We also happen to have an absurdly unbelievable research producer in Dave Holtzman, and it's like, I know how to research a lot of that stuff, not to his level, but probably better than some others. But it's not the best use of my time, especially I've got this other business now, speaking and all that. But I know what I need to do to get ready every single day. And I would also say this, and Bobby, I'm pretty sure you can relate to this too, that if you were to tell me right now that the Royals were going to play some game that randomly popped up on November 1st on the calendar and we got to do a pregame show in 5 minutes. Don't worry that you don't have a sport coat on, and don't worry that you're sitting in, your office studio. We'll put you on Zoom, but you got to go do a 30-minute show in 5 minutes. I'd be fine.
Yeah,
right.
Is it the preparation that I would want? No, but I have such a long history of having done this, for better or worse, that I know how to do it. And so if you throw something at me right now, it won't freak me out in any way. And that's not something I could have done before, but you do something enough over and over again, and it's just part of who you are.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, it's so I'm doing something a little bit different this week. It's interesting that we're talking about in the connection with the Royals and the prep work that Darren just alluded to. So we have Royals Fantasy Camp that starts next Monday. I'm leaving today to go down there a couple of days early. I'm driving because Dina hired me to play the opening night ceremony concert. So I'm putting on the show for all the guests of camp and everything. It's something that I'm really not accustomed to doing, is doing a solo show. I sing lead in a bunch of bands. I've toured all over the world, played for a ton of people, but this is a different animal. So I've had to prep differently. Now, the point is, though, like you, I'm thrown into a ring of fire that I'm not used to, but I know it's going to be okay because I've been on stage 1,000 times, and I know no matter what, it's going to be okay. So I just kind of have that peace of mind like you're talking about. Or like, honestly, we're talking about podcasts. So when we first started doing the show, our prep was a lot longer. Right. Like 2, 3, 4 hours to make sure that we're getting all kinds of research. That's not to say we're not doing a ton of research now leading up to a show.
Right.
But I
it
know
turns out we had a lot of stories we never used. Right.
But we kind of, you learn to almost trim the fat, so to speak, so that you're not wasting your time. And I think that's a good thing to talk about for any line of work, is somebody just learn what works for you and what makes you the most efficient, and then you'll be the best at your craft.
Yeah, and I think there's no reason why you can't steal from everybody along the way. So for me, and understanding yourself too, we're all wired differently. So I'm not great with process. I'm not great with, I can follow it, but I'm not great at necessarily creating it. And, really, you either watch what other people do and then figure out which of those pieces work for you. Or you just kind of trial and error. And so, I'm constantly evaluating and working on my process for my podcast of not so much the interviewing part, but the post-production. And I've got people on my team that do a lot of it, but I still pick the sound bites and the quotes. And so what's the best way to edit those down and put them into here and do this and all that? And you just, again, if you're constantly looking inward at this was a waste of time or this was clunky, but sometimes for someone like me, I don't really know. I'm not good at figuring out what would work better all the time. And so that's why I do think that it's great to ask other people that are in whatever industry you're in how they do it. What's your workflow? I'm working on a speaking promo video right now that was shot for me by a really close friend of mine, and he's an editor, and I want to pick his brain on just his workflow of a big project like that, of how he takes it in, because I'm pretty sure that while mine won't be the exact same, his is probably more efficient, and there are probably some things in there that I didn't think of or don't know how to do. And so I do think that the people that are around you or the people that are in your industry, whatever it is, it's good to learn from them, but that doesn't mean that you need to necessarily copy them. And if what works for them is exactly what's going to work for you, then go ahead and copy them. That's fine. You're not really stealing ideas. I think it's just figuring out, because that's the battle. I mean, I think going back to what I said before, that once you can figure out what works for you, you free yourself of all those other distractions. You free yourself of the noise. And whether it's in terms of time management, or whether it's just being able to focus on what you want to focus on. Now, take it a step further. And I know everybody's a little bit different on this, but nerves aren't necessarily a bad thing if they're used in a good way, right? I mean, Bobby, if you end up with some nerves performing solo there, it's not going to be because you're doubting your ability. It's just because it's something new. Yeah. But you will then tell yourself, I think, well, I know how to do this. So those are good nerves. But I know when I was younger, I'd be nervous about a million things, and it could paralyze you a little bit. And it's not that I couldn't do a broadcast, but I don't think I was able to fully be myself, because you're thinking of, this has to be true for a musician too, you're thinking of too many checklists. You're thinking of too many things that you got to get this right, you got to get this right, you got to get that right. I don't think about almost any of that now, other than there are stretches during the season, and I've identified this over the years, and I found it fascinating just for myself, where I could get into slumps. And I don't mean like, okay, he stumbled on this, he stumbled on that. We could find those every single day, but just stretches where I'm like, I feel off. And I've come to realize that it just happens when you're doing this every single day, where you just kind of get in some funk. So then it's a matter of saying, okay, why? What am I doing wrong? Let's figure that one out right now and hone in on a couple of things that have always worked, and just sort of a reevaluation. And that'll happen multiple times during the year, or even, the way that I do my scorecards or my note-taking or all of that. Wait a minute, this could be done better here. So I do think that once you even have that process, it could always be tweaked, but it's never major changes. And I will tell you that when you don't have that massive checklist in your head, and maybe you just want to focus on one or two things that you've been struggling with, that's easy. But it's when your mind is all over the place that you can't be yourself. And so that's a great comfort zone and a sweet spot. That's why when people say to me, do you ever get nervous on TV? The honest, true answer, I'm not trying to be full of myself or be overly confident. I'm not an overly confident person. The answer is no, because what I say to people all the time is, do you get nervous going to your job? And if you've been going to your job for this many years, you probably don't.
Right. Exactly. Well, and speaking of the job, I want to take one step back on you, Joel, because, I think you and I are fairly similar age, maybe a child of the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. But, back then the technology is nothing what we see right now. And, I was reading on you that, nothing was ever handed to you, right? Like the Royals just didn't, or, when you're in St. Louis and Kansas City, no one just said, hey, Joel, we're going to hand you this job. So tell us a story or two, because you got your start by literally knocking on doors of TV stations and cold calling. And I know some of the younger listeners out here won't know what like cassette tapes are, but like you actually you were handing out resume tapes to people. So
yeah.
Tell us if you have any humorous stories or anything like that about the coming up of Joel Goldberg.
Yeah, this is one that I'm really proud of, because I want to preface this by saying that this kind of story in my beginning really all pertains to cold calling. And like most people, not all, most people, I hate cold calling. It's extremely uncomfortable. And for the people that are good at it, I wish I could be them, provided that they also have a filter and understand the right and wrong time. That's one of the problems to me with people, and it's more prevalent now than ever with the ease of social media, LinkedIn, and all that, is that people don't know the right and wrong time, and that can disqualify you right away. That wasn't the issue for me. It never really has been. I'm very conscientious of that, not just with anything. I mean, with the time I ask for Royals players, very self-aware, always have been of the right and wrong time. Reading the room is what I like to say. But what I also understood back then was that I was no different, no better, maybe worse than anybody else coming out of college that year. This was 1994, and I actually love to talk to a lot of groups that I speak to about this too. That has nothing to do with television, but I just make up the number. Let's say that 10,000 kids in America, and I don't know what the margin for error is on that, but let's just say 10,000 kids were coming out of undergrad that year in 1994 that wanted a job on television. And there were 50 jobs open, 25 jobs open, maybe over time 100 jobs open. How in the world am I going to be in the top 50 out of 10,000? When I don't even think I'm all that good at that point. I know that I have the work ethic that's as good as anybody's. I know I have the passion that's as good as anybody's. But outside of, some kind of prodigy, most of us weren't all that good coming out of college. I would argue that today people are much better, because on the simplest level, everybody has been in front of a camera since they were teenagers or before with a cell phone.
Exactly.
We didn't have that. We had video cameras. And so I was rejected everywhere I applied. And to date myself, but it's worth pointing out, internet was really new. Email was brand new. I mean, my senior year in college, if you could sign up for an email account, you had to go to the school library to log into it. So, I mean, there wasn't like, cell phones were like coming in a big suitcase and you probably didn't have one. And so, we didn't, nowadays, I like to say nowadays, the kids, they don't send resume tapes. Who has a tape? You send a link to YouTube with your reel.
Yep.
And so that way you can make sure that they get it. Well, I remember a few years ago, my nephew said, yeah, but nowadays we have LinkedIn. And I said, so does everybody else. So, okay, it's easier to get a hold of that news director today. And it's also easier for the other 10,000 people that are graduating. So the question I love to ask anyone in whatever they do in their business is, what makes you different? And the answer can't be I'm better than everybody else, because somebody's going to be as good as you, if not better. What makes you different? So I subscribed, I wish I knew how much it was, to some monthly service. It was probably like $50 a month, 40, I don't know. I mean, it felt like it was $10,000 a month for me. And you had a special code with your subscription. You could call it every day, and when you punched in your code, it would list off on the actual phone call, from my parents' landline. Well, it's the only phone they had. It listed off what jobs were open.
Wow.
And so it'd give you the contact information, and then I'd send the resume and a resume tape and a resume and a cover letter to the contact. And I got back rejection letters from 20 something of them, like 0 for 20 something. And that's when I said, I got to do something about it. I don't remember if anybody gave me this idea or not, but I'm not wired this way. And I started cold calling TV stations, and it basically went this way every time. I'm sure that I had a script that I wrote out in front of me. And I'd call, and the receptionist would answer, and I would say, smaller markets, by the way, too, like nothing the size of a Kansas City, or certainly my hometown of Chicago, or my original hometown of Philadelphia. Smaller markets, Quincy, Illinois, Peoria, Illinois, Mason City, Iowa, Rochester, Minnesota. And I'd call these places, and the receptionist would answer, and I would say, who's your news director? And they'd say, oh, it's Dave Smith. I'd say, thanks. And I'd hang up. And then I'd call back 10 minutes later, as if it mattered, that like somehow I couldn't just ask on the spot, could you transfer me? So 10 minutes later, I'd call back. Hi, could I speak with Dave Smith? Hi, Mr. Smith. My name is Joel Goldberg. I just graduated from the University of Wisconsin. I understand that you don't have a job opening right now, but I happen to be passing through Terre Haute in 2 weeks. Would you be available on that Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday? And they never said no. The worst I got was, would you be available so I could stop in and meet you and introduce myself? The worst I got was, well, I don't know that I'm going to be here, but you could drop off a tape. And that was maybe one or two of them. And it happened to be in cities where I was already got a yes somewhere else. So I went. I was never going to those places, but as soon as they said yes, I was going to Terre Haute, and I, hopped in my Honda Civic and took the one sport coat that I had, and I'd pull into town at the McDonald's, and then I'd change into that, and I'd go and meet. And suddenly I had this binder full of notes of 20 something stations that I'd visited and 20 something news directors that I'd met. And oftentimes I'd meet the news anchor and the sports anchor and the weather person and the on and on and on and on and on. And that was, I don't know, I'd say July and August of 1994. And by October, the first job offer came in. And by November and December, after I'd started working, more job offers came in. I would have never got in. And most people that I knew didn't get in because it was just, who wants to do all that?
Right.
Well,
that's a fantastic. Go ahead.
It is. Well, there's a couple things. Number one, we love the quote that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Right. And so, not saying obviously you were very talented, but you took everything to another level and said, I'm going to flip the script in order to get in front of some people. I'm going to work harder in a different type of way.
He was relentless.
Yeah. And I think that there's a big quote, there's a big theme that's part of your book and part of what you do now with your speaking is about perseverance and how you really broke in. This wasn't like, oh, I went 0 for 20 and I'm just going to take no for an answer and I must suck and this degree was a waste of time. You said, no, I'm going to do this differently, and I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure that I have an opportunity when most people would have just given up.
Yeah, and I did have that kind of oh crap moment where I was like, this just isn't going to work. And I don't know, I can't piece it together now. I don't know if that's what fueled me to start making those calls out of fear, but this is something that I dreamed of from as early as I can remember. I also had worked throughout all of high school and college at a local hot dog stand, and started there my freshman year of high school. Pretty much unlike anyone else that I went to high school with, everybody else had like 15 jobs throughout high school, right? And I was the only one that just stayed in one spot. I started at that place at $3.35 an hour. And when I'd come home from college, I was working there. And, you serving customers behind the counter or flipping hot dogs, flipping burgers and cooking hot dogs and all that type of stuff. And over time, they would give me more responsibility. And, now I'm a teenager closing the place down. I'm the only one in there, mopping everything up and on and on and on. And well, maybe with a couple other guys in there, but I'm in charge. And so they offered me, the owner of this place was really successful, restaurant. They offered me $25,000 to manage it out of college. And so I started considering maybe I'll just go that route. And, I remember my dad wasn't really happy with that just because he's like, what did we send you to college for? You could have just stayed home. Right. So that motivated me a little bit too. But really more than that, it was just like my dream has always been to be a broadcaster. So, okay, maybe I have this fallback, but I'm going to push harder. Like I can't take no for an answer here. Like I'm not like that. I'm not a pushy person. I'm not. I'll generally, if I get rejected, okay, that's fine. And nobody likes rejection, but I just couldn't take the rejection. And I don't know that I had the foresight to. It wasn't like, okay, if I don't do this, I'll regret it forever. It was just like it was the only plan that I had. And so even though I had this fallback with the restaurant, it just was not anything that I was legitimately going to consider. The irony of all of that is that my first TV job in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, way up northern Wisconsin, for NBC television station up there, my first yearly salary there was almost, it was a little over half of what I would have made at the restaurant.
Okay.
So, I was making pennies up there, but I was in, and that's all I wanted. I didn't care about the money at that point. If they're not paying you a whole lot, that's why you're living with a roommate in a 2-bedroom. That was a total of $340, $170 a piece a month.
Is that the real number?
And you knew that number right off the top of your head.
I can't remember the score of a game from the night before. Sometimes I can't remember where we were or who. Maybe that's age, but I can remember
that's
that.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was $13,500 a year, $170. The rent was $300 a month. I was living by myself, above a house that they rented out the whole upper floor, and I couldn't afford the $300, so I moved in with the director of our TV station. And he was in a little apartment right by the TV station, and so it was $340 a month, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, $170.
There you go. And what was that? Your first break getting into that TV station? Was that the first break?
Yeah, that was the first break. That was the first break, and I had more opportunities, and I just thought, at least back then, that I'm probably supposed to stay here 2 years, like the old-fashioned, which nobody would do anymore. But I learned a lot there, and I'll also say that every stop along the way, Rhinelander, Wisconsin, back to Madison, Wisconsin, then St. Louis, there were opportunities for promotion where I every time got passed over, and dealt with that rejection, just kind of kept going forward. And I mean, it all obviously.
Yeah.
All
Oh, absolutely. So, let's talk about that, because we love talking about, the fear and relentless, because I want people to see, when they're looking at you on whether it's the postgame or pregame of Royals Live or seeing you in one of your speaking engagements, for them to really know, your backstory, which is fantastic. So knowing that, so you're in St. Louis, what prompted you being there? How did that whole transform coming over to Kansas City? Because, I don't know if people, clearly, we're not hitting, like, it's the St. Louis Cardinals, right? So,
Right.
so how did that happen coming over to Kansas City across the state? It's kind of rivals, even though the Cardinals have had a much better history, but how did that unfold coming to Kansas City?
Well, this is a great story because same kind of, well, I wasn't passed over for anything. So I had two jobs in St. Louis, two employers. The first one was the local Fox. So, like Fox 4 here in Kansas City, the St. Louis version. And I was at that place. We actually, back then, I don't think anybody has this anymore. We had four on-air people just for sports at that local Fox television station. I mean, now most people have two, maybe three. And, when I started there, I was the fourth in line. Then I was the third in line. I got passed over for the weekend anchor job. So I was kind of just stuck in that three spot, which was still great because I was getting all the great, the top reporting assignments. And that's what got me to Super Bowls and things like that. Greatest show on turf. But when the regional Fox Sports Midwest, like, the old Fox Sports Kansas City here, had an opening. Actually, they had an opening a few years before, and they chose someone else, and then came back to me 3 years later saying, you know what, we've got that opening again, and that one didn't work out, but we made a mistake. We'd like to have you. And so that's kind of what got this whole ball rolling, because that was 2005. They approached me after the 2004 World Series, where Boston swept, winning their first World Series and breaking their drought, swept the Cardinals, and they just saw me working, that October, and were, I guess, impressed with it, and said, we've been watching you, and we made a mistake. We want to bring you in. So that's really still my employer. I mean, technically, I'm an independent contractor. Everybody, for some reason, wants to know who my boss is, and I guess it's that group. But when I was working for them, I mean, this is 2005. I mean, so we're talking about having been with them now 18 years, but the last 15 in Kansas City as an independent contractor. So I was one of three people there that were sharing reporting and hosting responsibilities. So essentially everything that you see me do here, the in-game reporting, the pregame, the postgame, and all that, there were three of us that rotated in and out. They also had Blues hockey. They had some other things. They had more than we had here just because we don't have NHL and NBA here. So, it was good. It was great. I loved it. I wanted more. And when I heard, here's a great story. I was hanging out with Brian McRae because his dad, Hal, Royals Hall of Famer, was the Cardinals pitching coach. And then this was like very early years of MLB.com, and he was doing some reporting for MLB, like video on camera stuff. And so they had assigned him to cover the Cardinals in the playoffs, I think against the Padres. And so he and I hung out a lot in San Diego and got to know each other. And then he had told me shortly after there that Fox was taking over the Royals broadcast. I didn't know this. Nobody was going to send me a memo on that. And I thought, oh, wait, I think BMAC was interested in trying to get some connections. And I gave him those connections. And that never panned out for whatever reason. But I was like, wait a minute. I'd be interested in that. My wife grew up in Kansas City. She moved away when she was 11, but her sister had moved back here. I had been visiting. This is 2008 now, or end of 2007. I had been coming here to visit since my niece was born, or my wife's niece was born in 1996. So we were coming here for Thanksgiving or winter break and things like that. So I knew the area enough, and I started asking around, like, they're only hiring one person. And so I pushed to get that, and I got that. And that, so there was a comfort level in coming here in the sense of we were going to have family. But I remember, there was a lot of pushback. Like, why would you choose the Royals over the Cardinals? I'm like, you don't choose the team,
Situation.
you choose the job, the situation. But I still remember, like, my wife's sister's family being like, you're not. I mean, are you coming here for us, or like, is it the Royal? Like, what is it? And because people don't understand our job and the way it all works out. So it did confuse a lot of people, especially with the way things could be in St. Louis. How could you leave our beloved Cardinals? And I'm like, well, first off, I didn't grow up there, so there wasn't a personal tie to that, other than I learned a lot and met great people for 9.5 years. But it never felt like the ending destination, just because I never quite got what I wanted. I came here and it was like, wait a minute, this is what I've been looking for. And
that's cool. Right. So I've heard you say that you have zero desire to ever go to another market as a broadcaster, TV personality, because of everything that you just mentioned. So I think you may have actually answered this question, but broadcasters like you, personalities like you, do have other opportunities that come up. So besides the family draw and being, the familiarity with Overland Park or Kansas City, what is it about this city that just kind of gives you the feels? And same thing where, people like, Ryan was on the show, and he said a lot of the same things growing up in Minnesota, California, right? Like, what is it about this city? Not necessarily the team, right? But what is it that has that allure for you?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't know if I fully know the answer. I think it's really easy to sit there and say, well, the people of Kansas City are so nice. They are. But, we tend to focus on our own cities, and I mean, traveling all over the country, I think most of the places we go, people are nice. I mean, yes, it's different in New York. It's different in LA. I don't know if I could live places like that. I believe I could, but they're all different. But like in the end, once you find your people, I mean, people are good here. But I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. And, I don't know that, like, I do think that this city is totally different now than it was when I got here in 2008, in the best of ways. The amount of growth, how cool it is, I think, to be downtown and in the city and to see the continued growth, to see the amount of young people here. I think it used to be that you could raise your kids here and then they move off and go somewhere else because they want to be somewhere bigger. And now there's a good chance they want to stay, or if they're not staying, people their age are coming here because of the job opportunities and all that. So I'm very proud of this city. I'm very proud of the growth, and I'm proud of the fact that everywhere you go, it's got to be the only city where non-tourists wear Kansas City stuff every single day. Right? Like, I mean, we all have KC plastered in the heart all over our chest every single day. You don't see that. You don't see people from New York wearing I Love New York shirts. So I do see more pride here than I do other places. But look, if this job and this organization, who I mentioned before, I don't work for the Royals, but I do work for the Royals. Nobody's ever told me what I can and can't say. Am I a homer? We're all homers. We're as is just about every broadcast around the country, because we're not doing that. That's the reason why people complain about Joe Buck, because he's not your homer. He's not supposed to be your homer. We are supposed to be your homer. We can get into that later, because I think Joe Buck is incredible. But and send me your tweets or whatever. I mean, maybe Elon Musk is a Joe Buck fan. I don't know. But if this didn't work, if the job wasn't what I thought it was, if the people that I work with the network, with our broadcast team, with the organization, with management, if it didn't feel right, if it didn't feel like home, it wouldn't have really made a difference how great the people were here. And so, yes, this town is amazing, but I think I wouldn't have been able to enjoy how amazing it was if the team wasn't the right fit for me.
Well, and and not to interrupt you, Joel, but just one of the thoughts that just came across my mind is, coming over in 2008, I mean, you came into a run of Kansas City Royals baseball that was fantastic, right? We host the 2012 All-Star Game and all those festivities. We had an amazing run in 14, which some people argue it was actually more fun in 14 to go through the whole, all the way through Game 7 against the Giants, and then, of course, coming back and winning in 15. So that was an amazing run for you to come in. But one of the questions that we wanted to touch base on is kind of a famous thing, but how did the whole Salvi splash thing come into play back in the day?
He and I have never been able to identify it. Here's what I've been able to piece together. And by the way, it was a great run, Darren, but we haven't covered 2008, 9,
well,
10, 11.
I kind of skipped over that for those were draft pick years.
the Jose Guillen years.
Oh, baby. Yeah.
But,
there you go.
I could break out some really good names. The Ross Glode
yes!
years.
Oh my God.
Ross Glode, Gilmesh, Jose Guillen.
Let's go.
Yeah. Of those three, the worst to interview was Ross Glode. If you're listening, Ross, sorry, but he wouldn't give you anything. Anyway, Guillen was okay when he wanted to be, and Gilmesh, actually saw him earlier this year. Great guy. I just totally lost.
So we're talking about
how
to come about. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Salvi Splash. Sorry, I do this a lot, and sometimes I got producers yelling at me. Let's go. Let's pick up the pail. Always yelling at me. To my knowledge, and I'm not saying this is totally accurate, but the first splash that I could remember, and I remember it because we were flying to St. Louis after a game, and it was Gatorade, and I just got hit with some of it, and the back of my neck was sticky. And I just remember sitting down on the plane in my seat, probably, maybe it was 2011, maybe it was 2010, maybe it was 12, I don't know. I could feel like the back of my neck sticking, and every time I kind of moved my head back or in a funny way, it would stick. It would just stick. And what I remember is as I'm feeling like that, I see Alex Gordon walking by, and he's looking at me, and I look at him, and I go, and he looks at me with that classic Alex Gordon smirk, which means he knows exactly what he's saying. He goes, "Did I get you with that bucket?" And I said, "Yeah." And he just laughed, and he moved on. So as far as I remember, the first ever splash came from Alex Gordon dumping a bucket. Nobody remembers that. I don't know what year. I don't know the situation. I just know it was at home, and we were going to face St. Louis, and that's all I remember. But Salvi obviously made it an institution, and it still is to this day. And even though he doesn't do it that much anymore, it's usually almost always now Bobby Witt Jr. and MJ Melendez together. But, of course, we still call it the Salvi Splash. What I can tell you about the Salvi Splash and Salvi, a few quick things. One, I've never asked him to do it. I've never orchestrated it. I've never I just roll with whatever he wants to do. I always joke that he should get, if we win an Emmy for anything involving that he should get some kind of credit, because he also takes over trying to be the director and wants me to stand in a certain spot. And so you can't, you're giving it away. You can't have them looking at, at the Crown Vision. You got to distract them by all this type of stuff. And I've always felt like, it's his thing. And by the way, not all the players, they've evolved too. Like they used to, like interviewing Billy Butler while he knew Salvi was coming was the worst, because Billy's attention span probably wasn't great to begin with, and all he's doing is head on a swivel. And I'm like, hey, I'm right here, buddy. I'm trying to ask you something. So it was a distraction at times, and it's not like guys want to be doused with it, but now they're kind of just embracing it, like, yeah, let's go, bring it on, and they're having fun and it's creative and all that. But my stance on it has always been this: if I can get out of the way, it's more comfortable to get out of the way. But I'm never going to go kicking and screaming. I'm never going to complain about it. I'm never going to fight it, because, one, on the simplest level, fans actually stay in their seats and don't leave the game, some of them, because they want to see that. And as much as I would love for it to be because they wanted to hear a riveting question and hear about the answer from that player, what do they talk about? They talk about the smiles, the splash, the fun, he missed, he got you, all that stuff. So that's that. I'm more likely to move quickly on a cold night, I'm more likely, especially if we're not traveling, to just be like, it is hot. I'll take it. I'll jump in there. If Salvi or a player is going to hold me down, there's no getting out of it. So just, wear it. And I think ultimately just be a good sport about it, because fans enjoy it. So why do I want to get in the way of something that they're going to enjoy? It brings them closer to the players. It brings them closer. It
humanizes
closer to just,
the game and the team.
Yep.
it humanizes, yeah. And that's hard to do in this day and age. And by the way, if it's something Salvi wants to do and I'm getting in the way of that, I complained once, and he's never let me hear the end of it. And he said twice, which is total BS. But we were in Seattle. It was early in a road trip. If we're going on like a 9-day trip and we're wearing suits, depending on the weather, for 9 games, I might pack like 3 or 4 coats. And it was really early, and he threw blue Gatorade, but he didn't dump the bucket, because you can get out of the way of that. He took like 4 cups and threw it in the air. So now you're dodging drops in every direction. And he just completely dotted like a white shirt or something that I had, or a light coat, all over the place. And so I said something to Mike Swanson, the media relations vice president. Hey, can you just tell Salvi, like, next time, maybe just the bucket, not. And Joel's complaining. He doesn't like it, blah, 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 blah. Which is, if it's not that, he's going to give me crap about something else anyway. That's the beauty of our relationship. So that's the only time. That's my favorite Salvi story, is that to this day, I know it was in Seattle. He will
That's
never
awesome.
let
Well,
me
I
hear the
think
end of
a
that.
couple of things. Number one, it's almost like, I know you weren't here for this, but back in the day, in the 90s and the early 2000s, you had, if the Royals got 12 hits, everyone got a free dozen donuts from Krispy Kreme,
man.
So people hung around for that. People, it's Fireworks Friday, it's T-shirt Tuesday, it's the Salvi Splash. You have an integral role in like this special part of the history of the team, of whether it's post game or during the game. And I think you should take a lot of pride in that.
Yep.
And secondly, we have a question from a fellow Royals fantasy camper. It's from our buddy Paul, who asks the question, how many microphones or suit jackets used by Joel Goldberg have been destroyed by Salvi splashes?
Yeah, I don't think any
Those are pretty
those
tested,
things
yeah.
take on more than yeah. I mean, I think I might be wrong, but I mean, I think Bobby, you'd probably know more about that from an equipment standpoint. Just like
they're meant to withstand a lot.
They don't. Yeah, like it's not like sticking electronics at home in like a bucket of water or whatever. Like there are no issues there. I think maybe sometimes the cameras you got to be a little bit more careful with, which are a lot more expensive. I will say that I have a routine. Anytime I'm doing a post-game interview for years, where I will hand every piece of electronics that I have, my iPad, which I keep score on, my phone, it's just generally those 2 things. And I will hand them sunglasses if it's the day game. I will hand those to my audio engineer, and he'll hold them. And then as soon as the interview is over, I grab those and I go up to the set, and we roll. As far as suits go, it's probably the number one question that I've been asked since the start of the Salvi Splash, whenever that was, is how many suits have you ruined, or what's your dry cleaning bill, or sometimes just is it cold? And I'm like, what do you think? I mean, it's not warm. But and I don't say that with any malice. I say that with just pure sarcasm. But I've never ruined a suit. It all comes out. And I had a lot of experience of this in St. Louis, even if it wasn't the Splash, because and still to this day they go to a lot of playoffs, which means that's a lot of champagne celebrations. And I have always, to this day, I mean, I know it's been now for us 7 years, but I take a lot of pride in never being the person. Not a knock on any of my broadcast contemporaries. I take a lot of pride in no rain jacket, no goggles, no nothing. Just I'm gonna have a suit or whatever on, and whatever I'm caught in the middle of it, like just take it. And so I've always felt strongly about that, and it's always come out of the dry cleaners.
Nice.
And I have a great job. I mean, just because they take really good care of me. Hangers, cleaners.
You're good.
I'm not trying to be like Talladega Nights or Ricky Bobby or whatever, but like it's like I walk in and they know they're big Royals fans. They know after a big splash.
I mean, if they have not grabbed hold of that by the horns and used that for all of their
marketing,
self-promotion
all day long.
That's awesome.
All day long. Let's do another question from one of our fancy campers.
Sure.
Jimmy would be crushed if we didn't
go ahead.
put his question out there. So what about this, Joel? Have you ever been awestruck or starstruck by anyone that you've either come across or interviewed?
I mean, at this point, no. But sure, over time, and I'll get back to what we were talking about before too. Like, in the younger years, you'd be nervous for stuff like that. And now, I interviewed on my podcast.
Said Bob.
Just aired recently,
Yeah.
but on Bob Costas, and it was like, I told myself there were supposed to be nerves because it's Bob Costas, but the experience in me, I was actually just more worried about what should we talk about, because you can talk about anything with him. And but there were no nerves because of that experience. So I think the younger me would have just completely lost my mind. I think, the first ever Big Slick had Will Ferrell at it.
That's right.
That was probably the one where it was like, all right, they're giving me a full inning. Now we just do a half an inning, but they're giving me a full inning. So I'm just going to, I've met Paul and I've met Rob and I've met Jason. Stone Street wasn't there yet until maybe the next year or two. So I've met them. They seem like good guys. I'm just going to start with them, the local guys. And then maybe in between the innings, I'll get the courage up to ask Will Ferrell to come on. And so I was nervous about that. But then he just crashed and he walked right into the middle of the shot and he just interrupted the whole thing. And that's when I'm like, holy crap. I'm sitting on the end of an interview with Will Ferrell. And
is that the Come On, Chen? Is that when that was going on?
Yeah.
Come on, Chen!
Yes.
Oh, Bruce.
Yeah. It was ridiculous. And it was just like the most fun.
That's
TV
awesome.
I've ever been
That's
a part
amazing.
Before we do we want to be super respectful of your time. So I think it's important that we talk about your book a little bit. Mm-hmm. So it's really, it's got some phenomenal nuggets in there, but obviously the main themes are, the small things lead to the big things, and in business and in life, and not just baseball. So maybe discuss some of the themes that are common and consistent throughout the book, like trust, empathy, accountability, and the makeup of a person, and how that sets people up for the success, no matter what arena.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, this book was not meant to be a baseball book. I started my speaking career 6 years ago, accidentally, but realized that speaking to, Rotary clubs, church groups, occasionally a company, but not really much, that I had a lot of experiences in sports, in broadcasting, that I thought might play even with audiences that could care less about baseball. And so the goal all along, it's really no different than going on TV and doing an in-game report. Like, if I dig way too deep into, say, the analytics side, then I'm going to lose people that just like the human interest element of it. If I get way too fluffy with everything, then I'm going to lose the people that are just the pure diehard statistical. And so you have to find a way to bring everybody in. And so that's what I try to do with my speaking. And I speak to all types of groups all over the country. So I guess kind of like motivational speaking type of stuff. And it's all about culture and leadership and teamwork. It applies to every profession. That's what I tried to do with the book. And so the book, I think trust is the number one topic in everything we do. Good teams trust each other. Good locker rooms have that trust. Good organizations have that trust, on and on and on. So how do you build it, right? And getting back to what we said before, I am a storyteller. I take a lot of pride in it. And with my podcast, which is much a leadership and business podcast as it is sports, I was starting to collect all kinds of really interesting stories from famous people and not so famous people. And they really paralleled the stories that I've heard of baseball. And so I tried to pull all that together. It's as much of a life lessons book as it is. And then the stories in there, some are from business, some are from baseball, some are from the charitable world, military, but they all have the same type of themes. And so that's really what I tried to do with that. And, we all in Kansas City understand the importance of playing.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Well, while we're talking about it, the name of your podcast is Rounding the Bases, right? With Joel Goldberg. So make sure you can find that on Spotify, on Google, on Apple playlists, so everyone can make sure that they
all that stuff,
check it out. How many episodes have you done now? It's quite a few, right?
Yeah, and I don't know the number. I was never really trying to fool anybody. A good friend of mine who was doing podcasts before me, he's in Chicago, and a big tech guy, was just like, just do your seasons by the hundreds, not 100 episodes per season, but just, label it. Everything in season 1 is episode 101, 102, 103. So I'm on season 8 right now. So we're like episode 8 something.
Yeah.
I feel like
you had me fooled.
I'm not trying
That's
to fool
smart.
people, but yeah, it sounds. So I'm never afraid to admit those secrets.
Great.
With that said, I mean, it's been, not all of them are on there either, because during the pandemic I started just doing one every day. They didn't all appear on Apple or Spotify. Some of them were just Facebook Lives. Same concept though, and I was sitting at home, not getting paid, not working. So what the hell? So I'm guessing there's probably somewhere around
awesome.
300 or 400.
Makes note.
Yeah.
Start episodes at 101.
That's kind of like back in the day when you'd go to the bank and actually get a checkbook.
Yes.
Right. And you don't start with check number 1.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Well, thank you for talking about the book a little bit, because it's so powerful and such a message, because it's not just about baseball. The idea of small ball. Yes. Cool. A lot of people know that from baseball, but what's the concept of, we always say it, I'm not going to define it very well, but the idea is to get 1% better each day.
Right.
And when you do that, I mean, by the time you've reached a year or 10 years, the level of mastery is so far beyond anybody else who's not focused on the small little things each and every day. Mm-hmm. And so I think that concept is exactly what you're speaking of in your book.
Yeah, exactly.
And and I think that, well, I know. I mean, I'm about to start working on the second one, and there's a lot of, the stories are never going to go away. So if there's stories to tell, and it'll be small ball concept still, and it'll have to do about dreams.
I like that.
I'll say that.
Dropping, you heard it here first, folks.
Dropping the gold nugget.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite questions to ask people is, what did you dream of growing up? Because we've already covered what I dreamed of, but everybody has dreams, and we still have dreams, as adults, as we get older. I mean, they just change. So I'm always fascinated, and maybe less fascinated by the superstar, but more fascinated by that guy that got a cup of coffee, or that guy that had, I don't know that I'll write about him in the book or not. I might, but remember Nick Deeney, who was like the 5th string catcher, and they needed a catcher, and they brought him up, and I think he homered in his debut, and his loud, maybe intoxicated Italian sisters were sitting there in Baltimore screaming their heads off at Camden Yards, and it was like such a special moment to be interviewing him after the game, and this kid, blue collar, East Coast, he made it, even if briefly. I just love stuff like that, and I think that they're often forgotten.
That's fantastic. Hey, speaking of stories, because we always want to be mindful of your time, and thank you so much for hanging out with us. But is there any stories, or one of your favorite stories, that you'd like to share with the listeners? And it can even be about Montgomery, since we'll be hanging out with Monty.
Yeah, we'll see him in
week.
a couple days.
So, any stories that really resonate with you that you think would be a good share for everyone?
Gosh, there are a million of them. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, say, an Alex Gordon would walk up to me and put his hand out to shake my hand. I'm down by the camera well or whatever, and he's got his batting gloves on, just lathered in pine tar, and so I'm wearing that the rest of the day.
Right, because he's under the radar funny.
Gordo. Completely. Every day when we would do our pregame show on the field, on the road, so we do them on the field on the road because we don't have a set, he would walk right in front
during
of us
the broadcast,
and it'd be the camera. And 99% of the time, it would be during a commercial, and I'd be like, "Dude, your timing sucks. You're not even you're not even messing this up." I think one of my favorites. I'll leave you with this one. One of my favorites, and I wrote about it in the book, but I think the chapter was called 7th Inning Stretch, and it was with Salvador Perez. And this goes to all about relationships and trust and everything. And I had asked him, on a Tuesday, we were in Baltimore. I had asked him if he could give me a soundbite about his mom, because Mother's Day was that Sunday. And he looks at me and he goes, it was Tuesday, and he goes, "Joel, Mother's Day's on Sunday." And I go, "I understand that, but you may not be aware of this or not, Salvi, but we actually work ahead." And he goes, "Okay." I said, "It'll just be quick. I don't need a lot. It'll be just quick." He goes, my mom is worth more than just a quick answer. And I go, You're right. And he says, how about I come on the show on Sunday because I'll just be DHing. And I say, are you inviting yourself onto my show? And he says, yeah. I said, okay,
okay,
good.
You can come.
Well, okay, fine.
That day, I've got a picture of it too. I think it's in the book. It is. You see the three of us. Now we're in Cleveland, and it's Mother's Day. He's wearing his pink, and he's got a big smile. And me and Monty really have fake smiles because Monty had food poisoning the night before, so he's eyeballing a trash can the whole interview. And I think he disappeared during a lot of the game. We've all been there. And I just had stuff going on at home, as can happen sometimes, drama with kids and on all that. And I'm like texting while I'm off camera, trying to help out and all that. So my mind wasn't on anything. And it was just a bad day. And we get home and we land. I just want to get home to my family. And I'm walking, we fly into downtown and I'm walking back to my car. We park right there on the runway. And I hear Salvi's voice, Joel, come here. I'm like, oh, man. I'm like, I love Salvi, but I just want to get home. But, I got to do it. So I turn around and I walk back to him and he says, remember, we're dealing with some language barriers. And, like, I'm actually close with his mom, even though my Spanish is horrific and she doesn't speak a lot of English. But, Google Translate works pretty well. Message each other that way. And he says, hey, my mom and my mother-in-law, or at the time it was going to be his future mother-in-law, wanted to say that they watched the interview and thank you for making them feel so special on Mother's Day. And I thought, man, like this is why we do this. And that cuts across culture, that cuts across language. And it was like, this was one of my worst days, in 15 years here. And I was very distracted. I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to the game. And yet it was that reminder that even these little things, even to a superstar.
That's awesome.
That one will stick
That's
with me
fantastic.
forever.
Being close with him and his family as you've gotten. Did you go down to Miami for his wedding?
I did not. No, and I would say that I don't ever expect to get invited to anybody's weddings. I try to be close with all these guys, but also distance, not because of a professional thing. I know how to do my job, but just like, they got a million friends, all these guys. I don't need, I just want to make sure that I'm sending them congratulations and supporting them that way. And congrats on the baby, sorry about the death, that type of thing. And just make sure that I'm touching base. But otherwise, I did not. And, quite frankly, when these guys get married, it was really hurt my
Exactly. All right, real quick, then we'll wrap it up. Off season, are you excited about? Obviously, we have a new manager. What's your thoughts, excitement coming up for the Royals off season?
Well, I think to me the excitement is just the unknown because we are now watching. We've seen it already. We are watching a new general manager essentially, and I was devastated to hear the Dayton news just like everybody else, but I also have equal amount of respect for JJ. I know that sounds kind of political, but, I've been around JJ as long as I've been around Dayton, and I'm just excited because even though Dayton's one of his mentors, he's going to do things his own way. And I don't know that we fully know what that looks like yet. So I think that's the excitement to me. I can't make a prediction. I think that they probably could use a veteran pitcher, even if Greinke comes back. For the rotation, and I think they could probably use a veteran bat that would have a Jeff Francoeur type of influence, whatever position that might be, just to get I think they could use a player or two that can help these young guys along as they're still finding their way. And I don't know if that'll happen or not, but I think it'll be an eventful offseason. It already is. I mean, this is the first time the Royals have hired a manager in the offseason. I guess that Matheny would be the last one. I should say that this is the first time that they have fired a manager, during a season since Trey Hillman. And so we kind of knew that Mike Matheny was going to get that job too. And, I think that Matt Quatraro was a very reasonable guess. He was at the top of my list because I thought he was going to check a lot of boxes. But I was saying that not knowing him. I still don't know him yet. But I've heard nothing but off the charts good things from the people that I've talked to that know him or that have worked with him. And I think that's extremely exciting. I think all the players are going to be excited. I think the fan base should be excited. And I think
awesome.
that this is
for
the
sure.
start of
Well, thank you
something
for
new.
that insight. Man, guys, this has been an awesome episode.
Yes.
Want to make sure that if you want to get a hold of Joel, hire him. He's available for motivational speaking or moderation of events and so much more. You can find him at joelgoldbergmedia.com. Find him, of course, he's very active on Twitter at GoldbergKC, also on Instagram at JoelGoldbergKC. Joel, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure.
Hey, guys, I appreciate it. It's great discussion. Thanks for letting me ramble on and on. And I'll just tell you, whatever happens, stay healthy.
We're going
We'll
to try
do
to come
our best,
back
man.
in
That's
one
the number
piece.
one
Yeah.
goal.
Exactly.
Guys, this has been the Always Be Cool podcast, hanging out with Bobby and Darren at the Summit Lending Studios. Make sure to find us available on Spotify, Apple, and Google, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Instagram and Facebook at Always Be Cool Podcast. Guys, take care. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode. And for that, Darren and Bobby thank you from the bottom of their hearts.
They hope you enjoyed this new episode. And if you did, please leave them a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in our community.
Also, feel free to let DC and BK know which business or community leaders you'd like to see covered in future episodes. Get in touch in the comments or on social media. See you next time for a new episode. And remember, always be cool.
This podcast is powered by Summit Lending, NMLS number 1850081, Equal Housing Lender.